All right, everyone. It is finally getting close to the September update. As a community for OPR, we've known about this for a while. It was announced, I believe, around this time last year, the September update where we're going to get, it's been called a lot of things. I think the Refluff 2025. I'm guessing this would make OPR bring it up to 3.5. And with that, it seems just like yesterday that was announced. I guess the year, for me at least, this just flown by. So, we have been hearing some news about this, where I think even some initial first drafts of some armies are coming out. It's getting July now. We're getting close to August. So with that, I want to put together some things that I would love to see in the 2025 Refluff, as well as just giving some advice for this is going to be a big change. And I want to go through not just some of the things I would like to see, but maybe some of the things that could make this work a success. So with that in mind, hey, if you like this sort of stuff, if you enjoyed it, hey, like, subscribe, and comment. I'm still continue to support OPR and continue to love this game. So let's talk about how to make this game better with the Refluff in 2025. A few things I want to keep in mind here. I want to avoid any sort of speculation. So there has been talk on the YouTube channel updates. I think he mentioned some stuff last month, and then he's on the Discord, or whoever's on the Discord, talking about this Refluff. So one thing I'm going to do is that I'm not going to spend a lot of time sort of giving any strong opinions, mostly about what I've heard, especially considering a lot of this stuff could change. So, I'm going to wait until the final product comes out, probably give it like a month or so just to really test it, and, make comments about that. So, I'm also just generally going to stick to my own opinions about what I'd like to see. So this is more not about what we have heard, but more about what I think should be implemented. I'm primarily going to be talking about it from a balanced competitive standpoint, but also just from allowing OPR to still be sustainable at larger points as well. So we'll get into that as well. So the first thing that I think that OPR, it would really behoove OPR to do, which is something I've mentioned in the past, that they didn't, it's sort of like after they released it. So I'm going to say this beforehand. That way, I think there does need to be a public playtest first. I think there has been a lot of confusion that's happened in the past with OPR whenever they just sort of released a live version and then maybe complaints or confusion and stuff. So I do think having a public playtest is going to really, I think you actually can get a lot of great feedback from the community. I don't really know how all this stuff is going to shake out. It seems like it is throughout the year, we've heard different expectations from this update. It's sometimes felt small, sometimes large. And that's fine. It can be. There's nothing wrong with that. That said, I think a public playtest could really, maybe a public playtest, the army builder, people can give this thing a shot to really say, hey, here are some things that maybe wasn't considered. The other thing I would say is that if you are going to do a public playtest, you need to be willing to change. Whoever's working on this design, if the design's already been finalized, there's no really reason to playtest if you're not going to listen to players. So this is sort of a thing that I would say have a public playtest. Be willing to change and be willing to really listen to players who, put in a lot of work to playtest this. So I would say, definitely respect your player base's time. If you're not going to change anything, don't do a public playtest. Because you're just going to have players take their important time and test it and then not have their stuff implemented. All right, so that's the first thing that I would definitely say. Let's get a playtest out, a public playtest before it starts going live. All right, so for me, and I think I can speak for a pretty substantial part of the community. And I think that we would say, don't become like 40K. Don't make armies complicated. You know, you don't need to have to get a PhD in all the armies just to be able to play a game. I think the other things that whenever the designs start coming in, the moment we start hearing things about like feats or like a one-turn feat or something, when we start hearing about stratagems, anything that sounds like a stratagem or a feat or like even like reactions, I think the moment the designs start reminding you of these three things, that's probably a good sign that you want to avoid that in OPR. If people really want to play 40K, they're going to play 40K. The reason that people are coming to OPR is that it isn't 40K. So what I would encourage is to really avoid some of the game mechanics of 40K and just continue to stick with the OPR method. So this is a similar thing to the first point, but I think this needs its own thing. So I know that avoid 40K and gotcha gameplay are very similar, but I think it's so important that I mention this to whoever is listening at OPR. Avoid gotcha gameplay. It's almost like I want to say it twice and just say it differently. If in the designs you do not want to have armies winning by gotchas, that is something that I think OPR players who are coming to OPR really don't want to experience that. I think a lot of people are leaving 40K because they're just tired of this. And I'm going to re-say it again. Don't really look at what 40K is doing and say, you know, we need to make OPR, keep the gameplay simple, keep it streamlined. The next thing I would say is that now, I don't want to comment too much on what like I said, I've watched some of the videos about some of the ideas, and what I would tell you is that there is seeming to be some sort of army-wide rule for every army. Feels a little excessive to me. I don't know that every army needed its own unique army-wide rule and buff. I'm not against it. Now, like I said, I don't really know what that's going to mean and what it's going to play like. So I don't have a strong opinion one way. What I would say is that I think that a lot of army-wide rules we want to be careful about, and I think it's been mentioned before, token creep or memory creep where you're having to remember all these different abilities going around. We already have with abilities and spell tokens, I think that we're already sort of reaching that maximum token level. I think that tokens they scale with higher points. That's the thing I would encourage is that OPR. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't like about 40K is that the game has become so complicated that you can't play it at larger points. It sort of breaks down. One of the great things about OPR is that the game is simple enough that you can play it at 5,000 points. And actually, I see more and more people are moving up to 3,000, 4,000 points because they're seeing that, those smaller point scores aren't they're not very sort of fun. I would encourage things. You want to streamline the game. I think the one thing that probably of the new rules that gave me a little bit of pause was I think it was the Dark Elf Raiders having a version of hit and run. I don't know what that would mean, but that does sound like that's gonna really slow down the game a lot. And again, 2,000 it may be fine, but when you start playing 4,000, 5,000 points, those sort of rules are really gonna slow because it's a lot of extra move. It's gonna slow down the game. I would really just encourage continue to streamline the game, continue to make it work at larger points, so that you don't have to get into all these things where a certain person is having 2 or 3 moves or all this. I would just say this. I haven't seen it played out yet. That was the only rule that I think jumped out to me as a possible thing that's worrisome. I don't know how it's going to work yet, but I would say, that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, and I'll kind of say this again. There's some of these points that I want to hit on 2 or 3 times. I think the game it needs to be able to work at higher points. 2,000 points or less, and I think the community is finding out this. 2,000 points is just honestly, it's pretty boring to play, and it's pretty unbalanced. And I think as our community they play the game more, they find out they're gonna, I see a lot of them they become very bored with 2,000 points. They also find that there's just a lot of balance issues at 2,000 points or less. I think people are moving to larger points, and I think this, and I say it again, when a game can only be played at a certain point level, and only that point level, it becomes boring. And I think this is another thing, I'll say it again, that's sort of ruining 40K. So one thing that I think could really help a lot of these armies, if we're talking about refluffs, I think a limited ally system could work. There are armies like Knight Brothers, Inquisition, Titan Lords, Gestures, and I think you could even look at some other armies, maybe like Dow or Jackals, perhaps, where you could maybe do something these armies are allowed maybe a few choices of like a certain unit. So like Titan Lords, maybe they're allowed to bring the standard HDF infantry squad or something. So that way you're not making it a full ally system. You're just allowing for certain units that can really keep the balance in play. I think also this could just fix the Orc Marauder fiasco. Orc Marauders where they split up them in goblins, I think was, pretty terrible idea. I think this is going to allow them and goblins to sort of come back together and, bring back that army where I think it should be. Yeah, I mean, so this may be asking a lot, but I do think that the game is suffering from ambush and scout spam. I think progressive scoring does something to help ambush, but it sort of makes it basically makes scout overpowered. So progressive scoring doesn't really fix the issue. It just sort of nerfs one, but just so if people bring a lot of scout, well then they're just super powerful. And yeah, and I think this is I think I've heard something about this on the forums. The Daemon rule being removed is going to be a great thing. That rule is just it basically breaks regiments, makes regiments almost unplayable. So I think getting rid of the Daemon rule is going to be a great addition to the game. Yeah, while we're talking about bad rules, surprise attack and tunneler, I know they nerfed surprise attack. It doesn't really matter. I mean, like the targets, the secondary attacks are secondary compared to that you get to put a unit within 1 inch. There's just no counterplay to this. I think it's an unfun way. It's unfun to play against this, and there's no really way to deal with it. I think these rules are bad. I think they just need to get removed. I think they just go to ambush. I don't see these rules. These are just problematic rules. I don't think they need to be continued to be kept in the game. They just all they do is cause problems. Yeah, and now I think I was hearing he's going to be addressing this, and I think that's good. I say that I think so. I mean, but I'll reiterate. I mean, since we don't know exactly what's going to happen, I'll just sort of say it for completeness. You definitely got to fix the regen and poison with Armywide regen and poison against the regeneration. I think this is probably one of the worst changes that happened with 3.0. Honestly, looking back on it, I think it was a bad change. And that is to sort of have poison and regen hard counter, have rending and poison hard counter regen. So I did hear that this is going to be addressed. So I think that's if it happens, that's great. So maybe even considering that's probably I've heard that he's not doing any base rule changes. So but at the very least, like I said, high elf fleets and I think dark elf raiders and I think what was it like the plague demons? Yeah, that seems to be being explored. So I would just encourage that to sort of make that into the final cut. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are expecting some sort of balance to the game. I really think that Alien Hives just does have to be addressed. Alien Hives is basically an army that was created completely different from all other armies. It's almost like Alien Hives breaks all the rules, where one of the most particularly problematic ones is that, like, you have their characters that can get multiple defensive buffs and multiple buffs. Like, I've never, no other list gives a character the ability to bring a caster, a pheromones, a buff, as well as like 2 defensive buffs. It's ridiculous. So I think that either one, you're going to have to nerf Alien Hives, or two, you're going to have to buff the other armies. I know they did, and I don't understand what's going on with whoever's designing these games, because they actually gave a similar buff to the High Sister, where she was able to get multiple buffs, and then they nerfed her, but they didn't nerf any of the Alien Hive stuff. So I don't know if, like, whoever's designing this has like a just like who just loves Alien Hives, but I would say it's starting to, it's definitely going to be a problem in the game if Alien Hives, especially with a lot of people playing Alien Hives, we just continue to see some clear discrepancies in the power level of Alien Hives. All right, thanks for watching. What would you like to see in the wish list? So I've given my wish list. What would you like to see? Hey, if you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, and comment. I'm always still doing army lists and custom armies. And I've got a current tournament going on right now. So if you're interested in playing some OPR regiments, hey, come sign up for the Planar Open. Thanks a lot.